Okay, everyone. Hello. I promised that I would give you my summary of the Stack Overflow survey for 2019. And I'm in a hotel room. I hope I clean my bed so you can't see that. But I spent most of the day looking at the survey and I took some notes. But I want to start off because I am a person who believes in transparency. I am a former educator. Well, I am an educator. So I believe in giving credit where credit is due. And I can say off the bat that this is a better survey this year than I've seen the last 4 years that I've been looking at the survey. It asked I'm trying to figure out the word I want to say, meaningful questions. And I like in various areas. And I liked that they just owned that this survey does not represent the global community, and that there is work to be done when it comes to marginalized groups related to gender, race, ethnicity. So I really appreciate that. This is a well thought out survey this year. I really believe that. And so I had some things that so it was, they said nearly 90,000 developers took the survey, and they really did a thoughtful job of tying it back to the steps that they've taken to change what has been happening in the last few years. Again, I appreciate that. One of the first things I want to talk about is this thing about productivity. I had a conversation with someone yesterday because I'm at Google Next, and I was at the community summit, and she talked about productivity in where it relates to DevOps, and she was talking about elite teams, and two of the metrics she used were the team used were speed and sustainability. And I had a challenge with that if that's the only thing we were using. And I'm really happy to say that she and I met yesterday, and we delved into her research to see that that was just only one measure, and they had thought more intentionally about a bigger thing. One of the challenges I had, though, was using the word elite, because we have this community of rock stars and everybody wants to be a ninja and all that. And if she would define what they mean by elite early on, there wouldn't be questions about what is meant by that. So, but the one thing that stands out for me, and this is what I've been talking about, is that when it talks about productivity, I'll just read you. When thinking about blockers to productivity, different kinds of developers report different challenges. Men are more likely to say that being tasked with non-development work is a problem for them, while gender minorities respondents are more likely to say a toxic work environment are problems. This is where tech keeps going off the rails, because it seems to be solving two different problems, but it's really not solving two different problems. Because in the talks that I gave at NG Atlanta 2017, 18, and at Closure Sync 2018, we really need to change how we define technical, what is technical, and what is non-technical. And so I'm going to do that here. Technical is something a skill that you have. So I don't think anybody in any profession is non-technical. We're technical. You may know a technology, which is different. And we need to stop saying that code is the only technical thing that we have, because if there were not HR specialists, if there now were not R&D specialists, if they were not marketing people with technical skills, the code would not matter because it wouldn't be going to anybody. It wouldn't be effective. So we really need to change that. What they know is a technology. And so when coders, when the programmers, when developers, I'm going to use their language, say that being tasked with non-development work is a problem for them, that's a problem. Because again, we're no longer in a industrial economy, and we keep hiring and functioning as if we're an industrial economy. We are not making widgets. We're not handing somebody a manual. Everybody has to make the same widget. They go in a car, they go in an elevator, whatever. This is a knowledge economy. And because this is a knowledge economy, we need individuals with a breadth of experiences and skills. And so when we allow the narrative that developers, the perfect development environment is someone who just is allowed to code and not have to interact with anybody, that's a problem for the business leaders to be able to leverage what's happening with overall business goals. Your code should directly relate to the business initiatives and strategies that are a part of the C-suite, that are part of management, that are part of sales, marketing, HR. Developers should no longer be allowed to stay in their little silo. That's just a problem. You are not adding to the knowledge economy if you don't understand how the overall business works, period. And that's a problem we're having. And why I say that the issues that gender minority responders are having when they say it's a toxic environment, it's the same thing. So it's not two different things. It's the fact that, and I'm going to tie this in later, because it's the fact that developers are enabled to demand not to have these non-development work put on them, that it causes these things, that they can stay in their silos and they don't have to change. And I just want to code. I just want to get in my space. It's just no longer great business sense anymore. It just does not make great business sense. And so if these individuals are forced, because they're going to be forced or they're going to be forced out, that's just the bottom line, to engage with effectively engage, considerately engage, empathetically engage with everyone else within the organization, the level of toxicity in these organizations, in these environments, will go down. This is just how this happens, because, they just can't be allowed to do this anymore. And so that is something I just talk about. And one of the things that #causeascene, one of the themes for #causeascene this year is you have to prioritize the most vulnerable. Tech is not neutral. Lack of inclusion is a risk management issue. And intention without strategy is chaos. And what's been happening is we don't have any strategy. It's been just straight chaos. But I really want to tease out that whole productivity thing, because development can no longer be, there should be no such thing as non-development work. There should be nothing. It is a part of your job to engage with the rest of the organization for the organization to be successful and profitable and cause minimal harm. That's period. So I really just challenge what is non-development work, period. And then, I'm just looking at, there's one thing, because I talked about vulnerable populations and toxicity. So I just wanted to survey, I'm just trying to, I took screenshots. I'm just trying to figure out exactly where I want to grab this. So it says survey weighting, because they weighted some of the variables or the survey results. Survey weighting is an approach used to analyze survey data when the survey sample doesn't match the underlying population well. For example, in our survey this year, 11% of the U.S. respondents identify as women, but the data in the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics estimate that women's participation in software developer workforce is about twice that. So more like 20%. I really like what you're saying. Does that apply to other members? Yes. Other members of, they should, I don't expect an HR person to learn to code, but it would be helpful if they could learn to read it, or even not even read it. That's just too much. If they were able to understand the idea why you wrote this code this way, why this program is this way, they need to understand that. That helps them better understand, particularly in HR. How many of you have received emails from people asking you, recruiters asking you for, oh, you fit this job, and nothing on that that makes any sense because they're just checking off things? These departments don't know what you do, so they can't even hire to help you do your job. So yes, they don't need to know they don't need to understand code. They just need to understand your thoughts behind code. So you as a developer, you don't need to understand the complete marketing plan, but you need to understand what the marketing strategy is and how your decisions in the code base may positively or negatively impact that marketing decision. It's the same thing as when marketing creates something, or PR does something. No, marketing does something. I'm going to use that as an example. It does not communicate that to sales. And now sales is running around because now they're getting inundated with calls, but they didn't know because nobody was. We need to stop thinking in silos. And so that goes around goes across organizations. These organizations in the knowledge economy need to be about systems, not about silos. So we know there are more ways in which the survey sample doesn't match the underlying population of developers than only gender. So they're recognizing that gender is not only an issue. And what's interesting is, which is really interesting is, when I look at, and they talk about this here, when we use weighting, we see small increases in representation in development roles that have the most representation for women, like designers, and increased representation for women in DevOps. So I wanted to bring that up. So that's an issue, because when I look at their was I able? Because some of the screenshots, I have this little bitty computer. I couldn't get the whole. I was looking for it. Yes, survey when it says salary to experience for developer types. Consistently, no, this is not the one. It's one where I'm saying this so you can go and look at it for yourself. It's one where it's a graph. It's a cluster graph, and it's a line. There's a where I thought I got it, and there's a line that says below it's more women in these roles, and above is there are more men in these roles. And unfortunately, the higher paying roles, which are above the line, which are men, are DevOps, and the design roles and the data. I want to make sure I got this right. I know researcher roles, educator roles are the below. And that's where, based on their survey, these are individuals who are less likely to be happy in their jobs. They are looking for more jobs, and they're paid less. So even in this, we see a disparity between the roles that majority women hold in tech and the value that those roles have when it relates to dollars to dollars. And in the roles of DevOps, in the roles of, and we're not even talking about people with PhDs and algorithms here. You don't need a PhD to do DevOps, but yet those roles are still held more by men, which pay more, and they're more satisfied with their jobs. Where else did I want to go? I talked about the non-development work. One of the things I wanted to talk about, I'm glad they teased out the ethnicity and race. It's still overwhelmingly white men, but they did more with the and with gender, enabling people to self-identify instead of having static boxes. That was something I really appreciated about this. One of the things I'm going to say, we see varying representation from men and women in different developer roles on our survey. All categories have dramatically more developers who identify as men than women, but the ratio of men to women varies. Developer types, this is what I want to talk about. Developer types above the line have respondents who are more likely to be on average men, and those below the line are women. Developers who are data scientists or academic researchers are 10 times more likely to be men than women, while developers who are sysadmin and DevOps specialists are 25 to 30 times more likely to be to be men than women. Women have the highest representation in front-end developer, designer, data scientist, data analyst, QA, or testing, scientists, and educators. And as I said, those were, when I look at income on their graph, those roles are below or less than. They're being paid less than. So even when we talk about gender parity, we need to look at not just income. And again, people try to keep coming up with simple solutions to complex problems. It's not just income that is the issue. It is the role that women are either being guided to or feel safer in or whatever. But these roles are less valued when I say that in pay. These individuals are experiencing less satisfaction in their roles, because salary to experience by developer type. Naturally, developers with more years of experience are paid more. However, some types of coding work are paid more highly at the same level of experience. Developers who work with data, i.e. data scientists and engineers, and those who work in DevOps and site reliability are higher earners for their levels of experience, while academic researchers and educators are paid less for their years of experience. That's a problem because, again, it's about where we value. When we're talking about researchers and educators, it is a reflection of what we see in the space outside of education. We don't put our money where our mouth is. How do we create, build, grow a more inclusive, a more critical thinking, a more creative space, space and the next generation of technical individuals when the academic researchers and educators are not paid? So then you get people who get in those spaces, because you see it in QA all the time. People rarely see QA as a career path. They get in it as a jump to something else. But we have to start somewhere. And this is that thing. That's that problem. Again, we're not in an industrial economy. We are in a knowledge economy. And where does knowledge grow and is fostered, is and nurtured? It's with academic researchers and with educators. We have to shift that. We have to figure out how to make those jobs pay as much, be valued as much, so that our best and brightest go into those fields as well, because that's where we will have impact in reducing the bias in our AI and our machine learning and our self-driving cars and all these other things. When we have a more diverse and inclusive function of people working on the research and educating. We have to change that. We have to change that metric. We really have to do that. We have to think about, and again, that goes back to not holding up development as the end all be all, the only thing that has value, the only thing that's technical. We have to shift that, because whether you believe it or not, many of you developers are developing yourselves out of jobs. And I talk about this often in my talks because you will be obsolete. There are computers there. You're building the machine learning that's going to replace your job. It will be hard. There's going to be a computer hard pressed to replace what I do. And so that's also a reason why you need to be a cross-organizational aware, I'm making up a term, cross-organizational awareness. And I'm going to write that down because I won't remember it. Yes, there's another reason why you need to have cross-organizational awareness is because it helps you. Automation is great, but something has to inform the automation, and you want to be that person informing the automation. And see what else. Oh, one of the things they talked about, how often do people participate on Stack Overflow? And I found that interesting because that's always been a challenge for people in underrepresented and marginalized communities. And I want to commend Stack Overflow for just saying we can no longer hold to the fact that of how it was designed. We recognize that there are newbies. There are people from vulnerable communities who need to engage with this site, and we need to do a better job of ensuring that they are safe and they can answer questions on this site. And it's interesting that, so it says that the majority of people participate less than, and I highlighted by gender on this one, but less than a few times a month or weekly. And then it said, why don't you participate? And then it says over 20% of respondents said that they never participated on Stack Overflow. And when asked why, in a free text question, many respondents said their questions already had answers. So they felt no need. Others shared different factors, though, including lack of English proficiency. That's a big one because development is English first, and that's a huge barrier. The time commitment involved, and not having enough reputation to contribute the way they want. And a few participants perceive the community or site mechanics are too strict or toxic for them to feel safe in interacting here. And then, do developers consider themselves part of the Stack Overflow community? 50% of men said yes, 33.8% of women said yes, and non-binary, queer-gendered, queer non-conforming, 33.1% said yes. About half of the respondents of our survey consider themselves a part of the community, but this varies from different groups of people. For example, we find that respondents who identify as men see themselves more part of the community at much higher rates than those who are of other gender identities. The tech community as a whole, and we at Stack Overflow in particular still have work to do in this area. So I really commend them for that. And then they asked, is Stack Overflow, so I didn't take all the questions. I just took the ones that I wanted to talk about. Is Stack Overflow more welcoming than last year? It's interesting because when you look at the majority of people who filled it out are white men between the ages of 18 and 34, the 73% said just as welcoming as it felt last year. But there were some upticks. They saw respondents who are people of color, especially Black and African descent, South Asian and Hispanic or Latino or Latina are especially likely to say they feel more welcome this year, both in the United States and worldwide. So that's positive. What would developers change about Stack Overflow? There's a cluster graph here. We asked respondents for a free text question. What one thing they would change about Stack Overflow if they had the chance? Respondents shared ideas, including comment privileges at lower reputations, identifying and removing outdated questions, frustration with duplicate questions and answers, and issues with community culture. That was a question I had because I really would like Stack Overflow to tease out for me what they mean by issues with community culture. I think that would be interesting, some interesting research and conversations to have. What is the community saying about the thing that they want to say? Because I don't know what issues with community culture means. And then there's a male to female. It says the aspects of Stack Overflow that respondents would like to change exhibit differences across demographic groups. And this is what I wanted to see. For example, developers who are men are more likely to want change in official site rules, i.e. from the algorithms from behind the site and from the algorithms behind them to how they are enforced, while developers who are women are more likely to want to change the norms of communication on the site. So there's a graph here. And so for women, it was condescending, the things they want to change, condescending replies, nicer, rude. These are the terms they use. Dumb, friendlier, assholes, thanks, confusing, knowing. And for the men, it was simpler, huge, banned, angular, official, complex, algorithm, expert, bounty, and force. So what we see here is Stack Overflow is a microcosm of the macrocosm that we see just in everyday lives, how men and women engage differently, and it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that moving forward. So that is my summary of the things that I pulled out of the 2019 Stack Overflow survey. Again, I am very pleased that some of my concerns have been answered, or they have addressed them. Let's put it that way. They've addressed them. They've acknowledged them. And I really would like to have a conversation about what do they mean by issues with community culture. That was the only thing that kind of left me like, oh, I want to know more about that, because everything else was kind of, I could come up with my own answers for. But thank you for watching, listening, and let's see what they do next year. Take care. Bye-bye.